Okay, we're going to go ahead and get our meeting started. This is Teresa Shope, Planning and Zoning. This will be the work session for Planning Commission meeting September 21st. Val, just to let you know that this is our work session and then our general session starts at 7. Just so you know on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our work session. Right now, our planner is not with us yet. And so, do you guys want me to conduct or you want to do it? Somebody will do it. Okay, so just to give you some information of what we're doing now is our chair and our vice chair are not in attendance. So what will happen in the general session, we will vote, we'll have a nomination of someone to chair the meeting, and then we'll get a second. And that person will take over and chair the meeting. That'll be from one of you guys in here. So as we get going on that, I'm sure Steve will be joining soon and tell you how to run the meeting because it is a public hearing. But let's go ahead and start with item number 1 is the concept review. Oh, yeah, so I need to do this first. So let's see, share screen. I had it up. Okay. Rotate. Okay, several meetings. Well, last year, Daryl Rupp came in with this property and did a rezone to an R110. The rezone was the only thing that occurred. What item number 1 is that it's a concept review and approval. Approval goes only through the Planning Commission on a concept. It won't be a recommendation to the City Council. A concept is basically a sketch drawing that goes over what the layout of the subdivision would be. We'll get into more details when we get to the preliminary stage where we'll have much more detailed and engineered plans. But currently what this is basically showing how they want to lay out and how many lots. That could vary depending on, engineering type things, but that's what we have. Does anybody have any question on this?
So, point of clarification, they applied for R110, but we're.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. This is an R112 zone.
R112 concept. A lot different than the one that was proposed. Or,
Mike.
So Teresa, is this concept that we're looking at this isn't the final or anything, this is just a proposal?
Correct.
Okay.
Teresa, so help me out here. What's the building at the end on the other side of the street? I'm trying to get my bearings here.
Just west of that is our R120.
But what's the structure there? Because is that our well? Is that our well right there? Right there. Is that our well?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought.
So comments from our engineer just indicates recommendations. Planning staff finds that the sketch plan reveals no significant issues in complying with the city's development and subdivision requirements, and that the Planning Commission can approve the sketch plan or concept plan as proposed. So does anybody have any comments before we move on to the next one?
So
It's just the volume.
There, okay. So gentlemen, I have a conflict of interest here in this situation. So I live across the street from where this subdivision is going in and have spoken about this before in a prior meeting. So I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation today due to the conflict of interest. Okay.
So noted. When we go through this, we'll ask you to leave the room. We'll do the vote, the discussion vote, and then go from there. Thanks.
Is that during even training? We can't talk about it again? This isn't a public meeting.
Right. So you also want to look at it based on our codes and ordinances, not so much if you like it or not, right? So I maybe could just offer, we had development review meetings. So just for the sake of the group, some of the conversation that came up in that was originally the concept didn't have a second stub out, and that was added, to that property next to it, so that there's potential for 2 points of access on the next property. So that's kind of a plus anytime we can look for future traffic flow. The other comments were that detention pond is undersized. Likely undersized, so it hasn't been engineered, but if you look at the size of that detention pond and the amount of hard surface, it's likely that might have to change. Of course, location and engineering and stuff might even locate it differently. It's just a kind of starting point to say, here's, meets all the frontage requirements, all the lot size requirements, and then there's a little variety of lots. That little, the parcel in the bottom right, that was also contemplated to make sure that this subdivision wasn't designed to block access to, what I'm saying, like arbitrarily, but that property down there actually has potential access off of 300 West. This map doesn't show it, but just some of the things that have been commented on up to this point, just to get to this design stage. So a lot of things can still change, like Teresa mentioned, based on engineering and that sort of thing, but general layout, that's kind of where it's at. Yeah, so the sewer goes 400 West, right down 400 West, and then, and then it jogs, it goes across the field to the south there. It goes on an angle. Kind of between there and then the Pheasant Run subdivision, yeah.
Oh, right on the bend. Oh, okay.
Just past the bend.
Teresa, this is Dave. Could I ask that everybody turn their microphones on? There's some that we can't hear.
Oh, so make sure you turn your mics on when you.
Or just leave them on?
He was just asking where this was on Island Road.
Mm-hmm.
So 400 West is the first road as you come around the bend on Island Road. So this subdivision kind of backs the homes off of 300 West.
Also, just maybe is make a point on that map. I asked a minute ago what that structure was. That's the city well that was drilled and put in place maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, maybe. Time slips by pretty quickly. And then, as we mentioned also, that we ran a sewer line all the way over there to 400 West. It connects, as Ty mentioned, with the new Pheasant Run subdivision. So there's a sewer line that runs all through those properties right there, which was also done maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I don't quote me on that.
Sewer line's probably closer to 15 or 18.
Could be.
Also had shadows.
Yeah, probably. It's time slips by, Lance, in a hurry.
Okay, Steve, just to update you, we just went through the concept plan review for the Rupp property. Dan Dixon has, due to a conflict of interest, lives across the street and is going to remove himself during that portion of our planning commission. So does anybody else have any questions on the concept? Okay.
Does anybody have, I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. Does anybody foresee any problems with this concept that they've given us? Because we've kind of asked them to change this a few times. It seems like that it looks pretty good. I just didn't know if there was anything that we should talk about that hasn't been talked about on this scene.
So just to let you know, Wes, that this is a different applicant. The Rupps did the rezone, and then this is Ben Russell from Center Point Construction is proposing this concept.
Oh, okay.
And he has met with staff regarding some of the items of concern from the staff. Hence, you don't see any cul-de-sacs and stuff like that. So,
And there's no bulb outs, no cul-de-sacs and things that we've seen in the past. To your point, this is a much cleaner.
Okay.
No, and I can speak to that per the city staff recommendations and things we requested. They were excellent to work with on this, and we're happy to work with us and make a good quality product, hopefully.
Wouldn't Center Point be working on behalf of the Rupps though? Is that Rupp still on the property? Is that correct?
yes, the Rupps still on the property and that's under contract pending approvals. We get a lot of them. Most of the development is like this.
Right. Yeah. The Center Point would be an agent for Rupps.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to item 2 and 3 are the same project. One would be a general plan amendment to from low density on this parcel to medium density. The rezone request would be from an R18 to an RM15. So we could probably talk about it together at the same time. So Steve, I don't know if you want to go ahead and do anything on this.
Sure, we'd be happy to. I've reviewed what Mr. Summercorn has put together, and really don't have any disagreements with that. This is one of those where the developer, though, may be looking to the city to try to resolve the problem, and really they're the ones that should come forward with the proposal on how it is that they want to address this. As he pointed out, there are some options. One would be, I mean, as Will stated, it doesn't look all that reasonable to actually require the full width of a city road. And so the city has its standards. The city council has the authority to waive those in certain circumstances. As Wolf pointed out, this is a sensitive lands area, and so the road could be narrowed somewhat. But that's a question that the Planning Commission and the City Council will have to answer. Do we want a narrower public road to facilitate this? If it were limited to the private lane, again, as he stated, then it would be limited to five units for both parcels. And then the issue is, okay, we have RM15 on the one. That doesn't necessarily mean that RM15 is viable on the other. As you look at the neighboring areas, what is in the best interest for the area, for the city as a whole. So Wilf ended up not making a recommendation, just I think because of the nature of this and the impact. I mean, obviously there's a lot of moving parts to this. I mean, there's the existing RM15 where they could get 5 units on, which would take care of that if it were a private lane. If they wanted to develop these together, and then he would probably have to walk away from that density of the zoning and spread the development throughout both the Hardy and the Anderson properties. Again, because of the unique nature of the property, the city has some flexibility with regard to, if it wants to grant variances, or if it wants to, again, modify the width of the roadway. So there's a lot of considerations here that need to be made. And there's a lot of information that the city council is going to need, both from staff and from the planning commission as they review this. And so I think that right now at this point, we probably ought to just have an open discussion regarding your questions or concerns, so we can be prepared to provide the city council with as much information as possible to support the recommendations that we'll make.
Steve, the applicant sent this afternoon some scenarios. I don't know if we want to do it during the work session or wait till the applicant is here and we can go over his scenarios during the general session.
I think that the commission probably ought to review those just so they can be better prepared to respond, or it could also be an opportunity for the commission to say, okay, we've heard you now. We want to think about that. We want you to refine those matters, and then meet with us again next month. And then let me just step back a little bit. As you recall, I think we've talked about this on several occasions. When there's an amendment to the general plan, there's a lot of deference given to the general plan. And so when there is an amendment or a proposed amendment to the general plan, one of the things that the planning commission needs to look at is to say, giving deference to the plan, is that one of two things have happened. Either there was a mistake when this designation was made for this property, or there's been enough of a change in circumstances that warrant a change to the general plan. Now, obviously, we're going through the general plan process right now. And as you've been involved in that, you see the in-depth and the commitment and the work that goes into creating the general plan. So I would hope that that gives you a little bit of an idea as to why we give such deference to the plan, because of the process that we go through. It is the epitome of examples of grassroots and input from the citizens. And so that's one of the reasons that the general plan gets so much deference. And so I'm glad that you're able to experience that right now. And so think about that, have that in the back of your mind as you look at this and say, okay, as our general plan is moving forward, do we have enough information out that we realize that, oh, what they're proposing is what the future general plan is going to be, which means, again, there's been a significant enough change? Or is this the configuration that we are really looking for in the general plan? I mean, was the RM15, a mistake? And do we need to work with the property owner on reducing the density on that? I mean, again, they have the right to do that right now. And so it'd have to be on their volition to make those changes, unless we came up with some health, safety, welfare concern, which I don't see one right off the top of my head with that property developing on its own, because it could do so under the proposed configurations. It's the addition of the Anderson property that makes it a little bit more complicated. I know I'm kind of rambling here, and I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure that the commission understands, again, the weight that's given to the general plan. And as we evaluate not just the property, but obviously the surrounding area and the overall intent of the general plan in this area, what is it that we want to see happen here?
So let's just open up for discussion.
The first thing I noticed here, and I went and looked more, I was thinking this is the road that connected up to the new subdivisions being developed, but that's not right. That's one more parcel over.
Yeah.
So this is a street that would go up and dead end, just as shown and drawn, right? There's no continuation and not even possible with the slope. Is that right? Unless you want a ski jump.
It would require a lot of dirt work.
And so in the development review meetings, there's also a natural gas pipeline on that upper side, so the slope can't be excavated. So you're correct. So when you look at it on the map, initially everybody said, oh yeah, road's gonna go through there. As we've had discussions as a staff, we have no reason to see a road through. We don't have any water lines or anything else that benefit by going all the way through that lot. So a dead end of some sort is the best use.
Do you want to look at the map again, or you want to
Yeah,
do
go
it?
back up just a little bit on the zoning map side.
I need to share the screen.
So anyway, that's just conversations that we've had in the development meetings.
One thing that kind of, when I look at this and read through what they're saying, is it something that we want for the city, that when there is a little bit of property that you can run through a lane, that we want to stack as many apartment buildings, condos, or whatever you call it, want to name them, into these kind of areas all the time, or limit some of that to a little bit more centrally located to do the apartments. And I don't know. I know from talking to Ty that this has severe slope and sensitive land, but is that changing the zoning on this, is that the best use of this land up there? I'm like Steve, have them bring what they want to actually do, instead of us trying to figure out and tell them, well, this is probably what works the best.
So I can kind of, that is what they're proposing. So initially they were looking at just the one lot that's RM15, because that's what they're interested in doing. And then they looked at the lot next to it and went through a lot of different revisions and said, okay, well, if the 60-foot road, where's it gonna go to? How many homes could you potentially serve in the RM or the R18, because you have to have frontage. So you'd have to have a 60-foot road that went clear to the end. And so that was their question is, do we just do the one on the RM15 and not buy the other property, or make it all one project and tie it together? So this is kind of their proposal of what their best scenario is to maximize the use of the property. And so that's kind of where it's at. So it's like one side without the other, or do it all at the same time. But I'm not saying it's the best use. I'm just saying that this is their proposal of how they would use that property. So
And so it's one of those where.
yeah, they would own and maintain it is the concept. And so the city, as we started, we identified, I guess, we don't need to connect water. We don't need, through there, the road. Don't really have an interest in maintaining snow plowing and owning and maintaining a 60-foot road for potentially one or two homes on the other side. Not that we would have to, they have to figure all that out. And that property on the bottom, we thought we may or may not own that, but we just found out this week it's not a lot of record. It doesn't have its own parcel ID. So whatever they do, they have to figure out how to get all the access. All of that figured out. It's not necessarily our deal to figure out, if they can actually make it work or not.
Correct. And
Just another comment, 700 East is a major traffic road. So, you asked the question of like, do we want apartments or not? I'm not gonna say if we want them or not. I'm just saying it's probably a very low impact being that close to a major road corridor instead of behind a subdivision. Does that make sense? So just from a staff perspective, little clusters of higher density here and there probably is less impactful than a major, like full width couple block area of just straight apartments. Because that also creates a lot of traffic on one intersection. And so pretty minimal impact where it's located next to a road, and there's no intersection on the other side. That intersection, or the future intersection, if there was one, would be across from where that other subdivision road comes in. So traffic wise, not very much impact. If that makes sense.
So, and because of this configuration and because of the city's interest in that property, whether it's perfected or not, it's an opportunity if the city wants to create some type of a development agreement. Yeah, we understand that on one lot they can max that out with the 5, but having the R18 on the other, is there some type of a scenario where you can have the homes clustered and they reserve some open space under development agreement so that you're not having the 15 back there. And the reason that my concern with this is that I mean, this is obviously a single family area, and this just seems to be a pretty abrupt transition as we go from, those are probably, most of those, even though they might be zoned R18, they're probably closer to R110, and then to go to an RM15. And I don't know if the developers even thought about that. We know now what the maximum density would be because we're seeing that now. And as we restrict road widths, or if we determine ownership of that, is it something that the city thinks would be appropriate to sit down with and say, okay, what can we really do that's not quite the impact on the neighborhood, yet you still get your return on investment.
Steve, a couple of questions. We don't have currently an R18 designation. Could the 15 go back to an 8, or what would the process be there?
That's with the existing R18, they have the right to build that way. But any new zone would have to be an R110.
Mhm.
And with it being an RM15, and this is something that they'd have to be willing to accept that. And the
10?
city would have to be willing to give a little bit on that, saying, okay, I mean, it is strange to me as we look at a zoning map, how that RM15 was there surrounded by the R18.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been with the city for a while, but I have no idea how that happened.
I think Ty may have a little bit of information. I think the 15 connected originally to the other 15, the bigger part behind it.
Okay.
But why that chunk was carved out, I think is a mystery for sure.
Yeah, so all of that was RM15 up to the Anderson property, and not including the Anderson, but there was no island to begin with. That was all RM15. And the city approved RM15 zone closer to the freeway. And when they did that, they took out the equivalent amount from this zone and placed it down there. So nobody knows why, because that doesn't really make sense. Especially where all that RM15, so we don't have the broader view, but it's, we have a lot of RM15 on the zone that has not developed as RM15. Those are all single family developments. And so, you know, if the concept is we're only gonna allow so many RM15, we haven't hit that threshold that way. But that's where the island got created, is we removed it from that. I think it was kind of viewed as undevelopable area anyway, where they took it from and put it on a different side of town.
So Steve, could that 15 go back to an 8?
It would have to be done with the owners agreeing to it.
They would have to apply for a rezone request.
Right, but where we don't have an 8 on, you know, we don't do 8s anywhere. Could that be an 8 so it matches the other piece?
No. The RM15, they could request a rezone, but they can't choose R18. It would have to be R110 or RM7.
Yes.
Well, and that depends. I mean, if we went back and say, hey, this area was supposed to be back to, there was some type of an exchange, and if this was a mistake by leaving it,
Mm-hmm.
then that's something that we could negotiate. But if indeed, when we made that change, the Hardy said, no, leave us alone at RM15, then you're right. We don't currently have the zone R18. It would have to go R110 at a minimum, unless, again, we came up with some type of a development agreement where we acknowledge what the density could, should, or would be. In other words, right now, they hold the key of having RM15, but we have the key with regard to access and the potential number of developable lots. And so, you know, it's still something that could be negotiated.
Okay.
Other just point of clarification, Steve, is I'm not sure that their 5 units max is the max allowed in RM15 as far as density. So in your description, when you were saying you got the 15 units total in all of that area, I'm not sure if we calculated that that's even RM15 density. It's not, it's quite a bit of property. I think it would be closer to RM7 or something because of the like it's not all developable land, right? So they're not proposing like a multi-level apartment complex with to get maximum of RM15. They're just asking for RM15, but I think the actual density is quite less than RM15
Mhm.
maximum, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see calculations on that, and if that's true, then if it matches the RM7 better, then that would be better. But anyway, those are just some thoughts. I know I'm speaking out of turn on a lot of these things, but I just want the planning commission to look at this as open-minded as you can, because indeed it is, even, I mean, there are some restrictions on it. Other than that, it's pretty open palette right now.
Stephen, another question. You earlier referenced the sensitive lands and the hinted that it could allow for a narrower road. What's the concept there? How does sensitive lands allow that, or why would that make a difference on the width of the road?
It gives you some flexibility. One of the concerns when you're into the sensitive lands is that you want to try to reduce cuts and fills. And so obviously the wider the road, it requires bigger cuts and bigger fills. And so to avoid those from happening, you can reduce the width of the roadway. If it were, for example, maybe you've seen some areas where it's more of a side cut along the face of the hill. And what they actually do is that they'll separate the roadway so that you'll have, one lane of traffic that's a little bit higher, be a little bit lower. That way you're not going so deep into the hill, you're kind of stacking those lanes. And so it just gives you some flexibility. And one of those things in your ordinance, in our ordinance, says that the roadway could be narrowed. But I do believe that my recollection is that it cannot be any narrower than the 50 feet.
Just in general, sensitive land, is that is that related to slope for the most part?
That's one of the criteria is slope. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
My question, I guess, is, and I think Ty referred to this a few minutes. I think it was Ty. So the access to that property, did I hear him? You say, Ty, we're not sure who owns it after digging into it a little bit.
Yeah, so we don't own it as a parcel. So if we do, it's by default. So it would just be all of the area currently not claimed, if that makes sense. Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, yeah, I've in my mind, I know that when Anderson's came in before, and this has been years ago, I went and walked that property, and I didn't do a deep research on it, but maybe it was just an assumption on everybody's part that was city property. And so, yeah, the information that you're providing to me is new. And so I'm curious as to what the county records show as ownership.
Yeah, so when we went there, it doesn't show immediately city ownership because there's no parcel. So the title, they would have to do a title search and find out if the neighboring properties who has right of ways or any claim access agreement, you know what I'm saying? Or whatnot, but it would take a lot of research to figure out if we actually own it or not.
Well, yeah, that would resolve it if it's a landlocked property, then these folks have got a lot of work to do ahead of them to be able to negotiate and find access. But like I said, I always was told, and in my foggy head, I think I saw a plat map that had the city's name on it. But like I said, it's been years, and I've slept a couple of times since then, so I'm not going to trust my recollection.
And
We have
they have access easement. They claim they have an access easement on the Hardy property. So that's really just something they have to figure out, right?
Correct. That would be on them. And maybe that's what we do say, it's really not appropriate for us to entertain this until you resolve the access situation.
So I got a question. Has anybody kind of taken the pulse of the neighbors around there? Huh? Just because this is kind of a unique looking development that they're going to put in here. And I'm just wondering, I mean, we've all sat in meetings when the neighbors are not inspired with the new development going in. And I'm just wondering, is this property, does this make sense for that area and the folks around there?
Well, I believe tonight is a public hearing and
Yeah.
there may be,
So we're going to hear
some of
from
this.
that. Okay.
if I can take just a second before we run out of time. I don't know that tonight that I'm comfortable making a recommendation for a general plan change and a rezone with the access issues. When you look at, this is one of those things that looks great on the map, like we talked about a little bit ago, when you actually walk out with a tape measure and look, at some point, a house was allowed to have been built. I'm assuming they thought the fence line was the property line. And when I look at that and the age of the fence, in my mind, I think that's where the property line is, even though it shows it a full 30 feet over towards the 590 almost. I measured it today and between the fences, it's about 30 feet and it does show on here close to about 60. At some point, a mistake was made and a home wasn't built in the right place. And there's some stormwater issues. They're going to need to collect everything and find a place for it to go. And I feel like this surprises me a little bit. I do feel like this is a good use for the property. Maybe I'd like a little less density, but it does seem to fit. But I know now, knowing we may not even own that property to decide how much we sell or give or trade. And there's something in my mind, and I'm no land attorney, that I look at it and think that fence has been there long enough. That's where the property line is. And I feel like the access, I don't know that we should change a zoning, and in my mind, a zoning and general plan change when there may not be, maybe it ends up in court, maybe there's a legal claim that no, that fence line is the property. Why are we making a general plan and a change without knowing that they can even get the access? In my mind, as I've looked at this.
There's so many variables on this that it's, yeah, I'm with you, Lance. There's a lot going on here that I think needs cleared up and burden on the developer, really. To do the digging and all that and find out what property lines are and what actually can be done.
Yeah, that's a great approach to take. Say, hey, folks, as we've checked the ownership records, we're concerned about the access. And so and until that's even assured one way or the other, even a possibility, it shouldn't be entertained until we know that it's even accessible.
Well, Steve, to have a public hearing, is this premature? Should that wait until some of this is resolved?
Oh, no, you can still go ahead and receive the input. I think that would be helpful. And let people know if that's, and then at the end of that, if the commission still decides that it's going to table it until the access issue is resolved, then the commission at that time would have the opportunity either to have the public hearing again or let the people know we've taken your note, your information, and that'll be a part of the record when we hear this again.
Commission isn't restricted to just one public hearing then?
That's correct.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I had a question for you, Steve. Maybe you don't know, or maybe you do know. what kind of time frame stuff? If a fence line has been assumed and been there for 40, 50, 70 years, do the people that's where it was assumed to be, they built their house there? Is there any kind of legal claim that at this point, that's where it is, if it's never been disputed?
Yeah, there's a principle in law called boundary by acquiescence. And basically it says if there is a boundary, whether it's reflected by a fence or otherwise, and that the parties on each side, have recognized that as the boundary for a period of time, then indeed that is the new boundary. One thing that you need to be aware of, though, is that generally does not apply against a public entity. So just like adverse possession does not apply against a public entity. So indeed, if we do have some ownership interest there, then that just that clouds that question even more so.
So, but assuming we did find out the city did own this, are we any way legally obligated, I guess, to say, well, there's 60 feet there, you can have it all? Or would possibly, I guess it's not our decision to say, well, here's how it's been for forever. We would work with you on 30 feet between the fence lines, or would we be bound to say, no, you can have it all or purchase it all? Or
now we would be in the driver's seat on how to handle. We wouldn't be required to go ahead and take all 60 feet back from each property owner. I mean, obviously the city would have the authority to do that, but I wouldn't see too many cities that would do that, because just out of equitable and concern for each of the property owners, and just what would appropriately be fair to ensure that they're not overly burdened. On the other hand, those that felt like they could, should, or relied on that for access still should be able to have access. So once again, it would end up being one of those balancing acts that you're so good at.
Sounds like we're going to get better at it.
All right, I just wanted to let you see, this is the interactive general plan map. This is the parcel that we're looking at, a general plan amendment. All the blue is low density. The teal is the medium density. Just so you have that look a little bit better.
Did you say that's the current general plan?
Yeah, this is our current general plan, not any concept for the amended plan. It's this portion right here. So if you look at this, would be the Harding property. This is the questionable city-owned property, and then this would be, and it's really light. You can kind of see the framework right there, and that's the Anderson property. I know we only have about 5 minutes, but Steve, maybe we can go over our procedures today with the chair, and how we do that, and then also guide that new chair for how to open and close a meeting and those kind of things real quick.
Sure, and obviously we're here to help. So basically, without your chair or vice chair there, then as we begin the meeting, that will basically be the first order of business. There will just have to be someone make a motion recommending that basically it would be a chair pro tem, which means for the time. And then once that person is voted upon, or you determine who that will be, then they can go ahead and take the helm from there. Again, I mean, Teresa and I would be happy to help you through as far as, motions and whatever business needs to come before the commission this evening. So that would be the first order of business. And you could either have Teresa or me be I would say, for lack of a better term, a moderator while that vote is taken. And then once you've selected a chair pro tem, then they would take it from there.
All righty, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and set the room for the public hearing and you can take a break and then have your seats up top. Thanks. All righty, we'd like to welcome all to the Morgan City Planning Commission meeting of September 21st, 2021. We currently have our chair and our vice chair are not in attendance at this meeting. So prior to starting the meeting, we'd like to go ahead and, with the current commission, have someone nominate a chair to preside over this meeting. And we'll require a second and then a vote.
Teresa, I'll nominate Lance to be the chair pro temp for this meeting.
Do we have a second?
We'll second it, that.
By a nomination by Wes, second by Justin. All in favor? All righty, we'll have Lance Prescott as acting chair at this time and to start our meeting.
I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to the September 21st, 2021 general session of the Morgan City Planning Commission. It is a few minutes after 7. We'll go ahead and get started. We previously had our work meeting from 6 until now. I'd like to remind everyone to sign in, who hasn't. And I guess we can move into our item number 1, which is a subdivision concept discussion approval. Oh, I need to mention, we do have no minutes from previous meetings to review. We'll be doing that at a later date. I guess we can move into item number 1, which is a subdivision concept discussion and approval. 11.25 acres at approximately 400 West Island Road, known as the Rupp property. And I guess I can ask Steve to give us an overview of this, correct?
Mr. Chair, before we get into that, I need to declare a conflict of interest. So I'll need to recuse myself from this discussion.
We understand, Mr. Dixon, and we will welcome you back into the room after we vote. Seeing a representative, normally we'd have a lot of times we have Mr. Garside give us an overview, but where you're here, go ahead and give us an overview of the project. Remember to state your name and.
Yeah, click your mics up during the screen.
Okay, now we're in business. Ben Russell with Centerpoint Construction. And so I'm here representing Centerpoint Construction and also the Rupps. This is their property. They're off of 400 West, just to the west of the Island Road. It's about 11.25 or so acres, something in that range. Again, here seeking concept approval. It's previously been rezoned to R112. We've met with staff and had a kind of a preliminary concept. We've tried to meet the code and the ordinances and the other requirements kind of as we understand them to this point. And so, but we haven't got too far with the engineering. I think what you see is pretty much all the engineering that's been done. So the proposed development would be 24 lots. Varying in size with the irregular shape. It's kind of made it, they range from basically the minimum up to, looks like one's just a little more than an acre. That's any other thing I could tell you as far as an overview or?
Do we,
Did I miss it? Where is this?
It's, you know where Daryl Rupp lives?
there you go.
In his backyard, in back of there. You know where Brett Nelson lives?
Yeah.
If you just take a left there at Brett's, that's 400 West.
Okay, I know now.
Okay.
I don't believe I have anything for you. Do any of the members of the commission have anything for Mr. Russell? And Mr. Garside, please wave at me if I'm doing anything wrong. Seeing no questions or discussion, I believe I will call for a motion on for either a positive or negative for the concept approval for this.
I second that.
Someone needs to make a motion.
I got you. I'll make that motion that the planning commission may approve the sketch concept as proposed.
Do I have a second?
You have a second.
All in favor? I believe to be unanimous. And with that, we thank you for your time, and we will move on to item number 2, which is a public hearing for a general plan amendment request from low density residential to medium density residential, approximately 1.5 acres. This property is located at approximately 759 East, 525 North. And at this time, if I'm correct, I can open the public hearing. And we ask that people just comment once and they keep their, try to limit their comments to about 3 minutes. And remember to please state your name when you approach the podium. I need a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to vote on the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? It appears to be unanimous. Public hearing open.
Multi-scroller? What's that? I'm just saying this so that you know what we're. And also if there's any online. That wasn't open. Sarah, would you like to just ask if there's anybody online that has public comment?
Is there anybody not with us in person but online that would like to submit any public comment?
Public comment. Richard Slate. I live across the street from this proposed subdivision. I don't care whether it goes or whether it doesn't go. You guys have probably looked at statistics better than I have, but it shows 15 lots up there coming out of on a 40-foot right of way. If you have 15 residents up there and 2 people living in each apartment house or condo or whatever it is, There's two people. If they make 2 trips out of there a day, that's 60 trips. So that's going to be kind of a traffic congestion, I would think. That's up to you guys to figure out.
Thank you, Mr. Slate. Mr. Garside, is there a time that we need to wait, seeing no other public comment, to ask for a motion to close the public hearing portion on item number 2?
Yeah, there's no time requirement on that. You can do that if you'd like. I didn't know if you wanted a presentation from the planning standpoint as a part of the public hearing and allow people to respond to that, or if you wanted to have that just information directed to the commission at the close of the public hearing.
I think we can just do that at the close of the public hearing. See no other.
Hey, Lance, I wonder if Teresa would comment on the process in notifying of the public hearing. Who's notified, and does that, just comment that was done.
We actually have someone approaching the podium right now. We'll ask Teresa to comment to that after this gentleman speaks.
Thank you.
Alan Jones, we have a lot that is near this area. It's not adjoining, as I understand it, from the information that I have. But my comment is regards to the road. It sounds like that it is a under subsidy or under regulated type road that appears that the concept in this is that road from the old Highway 30 that is presently there up the hill, you know, we'd be better off having that abandoned, because there's a road going in just a little bit further north, I believe, another half a block or whatever it might be down the road. And if this rezoning is approved, the reality is they're going to go up on the road or up in that lot and extend a road horizontal or parallel to the Highway 30 road that's there now, going to the road that is being presently engineered, constructed, and put in. So rather than fight a very narrow road that would have to have all kinds of extra approvals and everything else, just simply you know, because it's going to be in a couple of people's backyards, or even have to have some landscaping or retaining walls or whatever might have to be made in order to even make that a concept or road. And the road presently is already being built, just come across it from up on top horizontally with the way that is. I think that's the part of the big discussion that needs to happen concerning the road and concerning this property. Whether it's rezoned or not, as Mr. Slate has indicated, it's going to be a very congested area on that one single road, where as time evolves, that other road or new roads are going to be made up on top in that development area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chair, I got a question for the gentleman that just spoke. So you're thinking that the access could come in from above that's parallel with the old highway, right? Is that what you're talking about? Because I don't think with the slope that you'll be able to come in from the backside of this project. I'm not.
Can we see a schematic of what we've got here?
This is the road you're talking about that's just being built.
Okay,
And then this would be
that is the road, that's the proposed road that is too small for city specs at the present time. And the property where the RM15 is saying presently, and I think the property that's been questioned is this piece right there that says R18 on it. Ultimately, there's going to be a road that goes parallel from that property back over to the road that is presently being built. That really, it looks to me like you'd be better off spending the money putting in a parallel road rather than trying to develop the road that doesn't meet standards.
I can probably speak to that a little bit. I believe that 825 East will at some point tie through to that new road. Due to the steepness of that slope and some high pressure gas lines and fiber optic lines, it would probably be extremely difficult to go up and out. There's
Well,
some better.
I'm not saying up and out. I'm saying make it lower. The RM15 property that's there now, you could come across on the bottom of it.
There's actually detention basins, and that would have to be something they would have to work out with the other property owner to do that, but it probably would or could be an option. But.
Well, it's worth a consideration is what I would think. Rather than trying to build a road that is substandard.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, looking at this and talking about this, there are so many variables and questions unanswered on this.
Hang on this. Mr. Garside, do we hold off on our discussion of it until after the public hearing closes, or do we do that as part of that?
If you're going to ask for further public input, then you'd have that a part of it. But if you received all the public input, then you can go ahead and close that, and then you have your discussion amongst the commission members.
Okay, seeing no other public. Okay, yeah, if there's no other public comment. Mhm. Yeah, seeing no other public discussion, if I can, I'd ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion. We'll close the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. And I'll ask for a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. All in favor? It's unanimous. At this time, I guess then we can ask if there is a representative for the developer here who would like to speak his piece, and then we'll have some discussion among the commission.
Mr. Chair, just to let you know, Will Summercorn Planner is also on Zoom. So you'll be able to get his comments.
I saw that. That was good to see.
Thank you. By way of introduction, I'm Jordash Wardell, and I'm representing Wardell Brothers Properties this evening. I appreciate all of you taking time out of your evening for this, and I'll make this brief. There are a lot of different variables as we considered this property as an option for development. There are just a lot of moving parts, so I've tried to make it as simple as possible, and I've asked Teresa to share a few things, but But before that, I'm representing the Andersons and the Hardys this evening. They are the current property owners. And I'm grateful for the opportunity they've given us. Really, these two properties, if you look at them with an unbiased opinion and without maybe getting ahead of yourself, you'll look at them and say, well, there's really no way these two properties can do anything other than if it's together because of their access. And I believe that Morgan City would have preserved that 525 North Street to facilitate access to these two properties. So I'll just make that brief introduction, and then I'll ask Teresa to show the first piece of paper that was actually shared with the public as part of the notification to the public. No, you're fine. No rush. That one right there. So there's two pieces that are part of our project, and I just want to make it clear that there's only one piece, and it's considered the Anderson piece that's outlined in red there. That's part of this discussion tonight. We're here tonight to request a general plan amendment and a rezone to get that to match the zoning there for the Hardy piece, which is the RM15. And again, I just want to make sure that everyone understands the Hardy piece really isn't in discussion. It already has the proper zoning for our project. But as we reviewed both pieces, it just really made sense with that shared access coming off of 700 East that we took these two pieces together, and that's why we've got both landowners talking to us, and we're able to represent both of them. So we've met with staff and on a couple of occasions and came up with a couple of options for how this could work. And so I'll ask Teresa to show the very first option that I emailed you this evening. Find that one. So this is what I call option one, and I'm going to draw from the staff notes for this meeting to discuss this. But it's wait for it to come up there before I speak here. Okay, there it is. So option one would be to build a private lane. And if you scroll down, you'll see that lane represented. The orange drawn lines there would represent roughly the width of a private lane. And this would basically be us just purchasing and developing the Hardy piece. We'd build private lane up. We'd have to make access for turnaround for fire truck. And then we'd build parking in a proposed 5-unit building right there. There's a couple of things that make this not, in our eyes, the best option. Doing this, and I'm going to read from the staff notes, would raise the question of how the Anderson property would then have access in the future. Not only would the access be owned by the applicant, but city regulations stipulate that a private lane can serve no more than 5 units, which would be all allocated to the Hardy piece. And so the only way for the Anderson property to have access rights would then be to allocate another private lane in the right of way, which is not ideal. So really it cuts off access to the Anderson piece. If you were just to do a private lane there, eventually a developer could come in there and then upgrade that to a full public street. But again, the cost of that for any future developer would really make that tough, and it would be difficult for the Andersons. They've had the property for sale for quite some time, and part of the issue with not being able to sell it is because of the access and the shared access in that. So that's really option one, not ideal. The second option, the city staff and along with us during our development review process developed, was building out 525, which is the road, they're calling it road, the access road there is a full public street. You can see the road's wider down there at the bottom, much wider than a private lane, if you will. It would be a city standard street. A couple things that make this not great. This street then would become a public street and would be maintained by the city, essentially for the benefit of two properties. And probably the bigger of the two disadvantages of this option would be that the substantial excavation would severely disrupt the house there that sits parallel right there. That property line is not too accurate. It actually runs right down the middle of that shed. And so that there would be a pretty substantial loss of the backyard of that property if it were built to a full width. Again, that's a note from the staff notes right there. There's an elevation, there's also an elevation difference. So not only you got to build the full width of the road, you've got some retaining to match the different elevations, which really creates impact on that resident. And in talking to the Anderson family, they really don't want to impact their neighbors too much on this. And they want to make it as minimal as possible. They've lived there for a long time, and they do have some interest in keeping their neighbors and their longtime friends happy. So option 3 obviously is the option that we're seeking approval on tonight. And this is going to show the concept that you've seen. It's basically a private street, which could be built to city standards, which would be built to city standards. And then it would be privately owned and maintained. And the city would eventually give up the right of way coming down for some agreement. And we've met with staff, and we feel like we could come to an agreement on what that would take to make that a private street going all the way up there. So just in conclusion, our preference would be option 3, combine both of these properties. It gets the most value out of each property for the owners right now. There's also a great demand for apartments in Morgan. I know there are many people with pretty strong emotions about apartments, but I know most of us, at least I started in an apartment when I couldn't afford a house. So if you try to rent something right now in Morgan, it's really not an option. And because there's nothing for rent, we have some other rentals, and as soon as we post them, we get tons of applications, and we can only fill one at a time. And it's unfortunate that we turn a lot of people down. So if the option 3 is really not an option, we would lean heavily back towards option 1 and just purchase the Hardy only piece. It doesn't make a lot of sense economically to build option 2. And obviously the Andersons don't want to impact their neighbors with that full width road coming in. So that's basically the presentation from the developer standpoint.
Thank you. Does any of the commission members have any questions?
Jordash, I have a question for you. Thanks. That was a good presentation. And I appreciate that you're trying to do something here that will benefit multiple properties. I think that's great that we look at those things as we plan for the future. Tell me, in option 3, the private lane, how wide is that? You mentioned that you'd build it to city standards, but I don't think that means the width too, right?
Yeah, private. So it's really sticky here. There's a private lane, then there's a public street, and then there's a private street. So there's 3 things in the code that are a little hard to keep separate. If you go directly up the road to Greatview Drive, they've got about a 35-foot asphalt section and then a 4-foot sidewalk on one side. So we're probably, I can't remember what we talked about in those staff meetings, the full width of that road, but it was less than the 50. If I remember right, it's going to be comparable to what's been approved for the Greatview Drive just up the road there. Correct me if I'm misspeaking from our staff meeting.
In sensitive lands, it allows you to drop from a full 60-foot right of way to a 50-foot right of way. We eliminate the park strip and sidewalk on one side.
So 50-foot wide right away, and I can't remember the width of the road plus the sidewalk.
I think it's 40 feet of asphalt. I think I don't have my book in front of me, but I think it's 40 feet of asphalt and then another 10 feet where a standard street section's 10
on both sides.
40 and 10. Yes.
Okay.
Does that not say 34 feet? Am I reading that wrong?
It says 34, but it's this was developed before our last staff meeting where we talked about what that width of the road would need to be. we would make it. And I believe through some appeals or different things, you could make that road. We really are concerned about making that road the width that would be non-invasive to the neighbors there. And it's really hard to see it from this picture. I kind of wish we could fly out there together in a plane and look at it because there's a substantial elevation difference. And it just, that right away, even though it's 60 feet, it's definitely not buildable to 60 feet.
Jordash, have you established the property lines with these for this road yet?
So of course,
'Cause in our meetings, it seemed like that was kind of, you didn't really have a firm idea of the exact property lines right there.
so my surveyor has not checked and pulled all the deeds. They just did I don't know how they do it, but it's kind of a preliminary double check on the property lines, but he needs to go through and confirm everything's accurate once we give him some direction on that. We just haven't had him proceed with anything because we didn't, this meeting kind of controls the zoning of everything. Our decision to move forward here is controlled based on a decision. We would, as part of our development, we'd certainly make sure that those property lines were defined and agreed upon, I guess. Survey is always questionable.
So the main thing is you're asking to rezone that and then you'll come in with the property lines, concepts and all that.
Yeah, this is just a rezone and a general plan amendment because the general plan, I think Teresa was showing it during I think the general plan shows the zoning for RM15 stopping right on this property line. But we have to, because of that, we have to ask for a general plan and a rezone, and that's the reason we're here tonight. If you go back to that zoning, the current zoning, it's worth mentioning in the staffing notes as well that the Anderson piece was zoned RM15 at one point. And if you look at the actual zoning and how this lays out, it would make sense that it would be based on that, the green line versus the light tan line on that drawing that she's about to show right there. I don't know how it was before, but I think that's worth mentioning that it at one point was RM15 according to staff notes. I don't know that.
I've got another question for you, Jordash. So relative to the comments that were made by the public earlier with respect to that road coming out and some of the concerns, traffic, also whether or not it's wide enough, those kinds of things. Mr. Jones, I think, made a recommendation that we come in from a different way. Have you looked at that as a possibility?
So we talked extensively with staff regarding that in our first development review meeting. And again, if we were to fly out there and look at that, everyone would be like, yeah, that doesn't seem possible because there's a gas line that runs. Teresa, if you could show them with your cursor, I think you know where that gas line, it runs right through that area right there. And it's a high pressure 16-inch. So that would have to be lowered. I don't know what the process of that is. And then there's a substantial grade drop. If you look at our concept, we're not proposing to build up on the back part of that lot because it's so steep. And so the city gave us the indication that road 825 East would go straight eventually. I don't know when, and possibly tie in over there. But as far as coming down, there's an issue with the width of the property the city owns right there. You can see where it gets really skinny. There's an issue right there with building the road through there. And there's an issue with the existing terrain out there being too steep. So pretty difficult to make it a through street.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question, Jordash. Is it all right with the council? When will this road right here be completed?
Yeah, that contractor, they're doing curb and gutter right now, so there's a chance it could be paved this year, but I don't know.
I think you're gonna start seeing curb and gutter.
Right away.
Well, there's no access from that road coming to this property. But yeah.
Do we have any questions from any more commission members? Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to ask if Mr. Garside, Mr. Summercorn have any thing they would like to add for the planning commission members.
This is Will Summercorn. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. You don't want to see me. I've just come back from a day of hiking up here. I'm right outside of Banff Park, so I've got my picture up, but I'm here. When we looked at this and talked about it, I mean, there are a lot of interesting issues that really need some consideration, but what all you're being asked tonight is whether the property ought to be amended as far as the area in the general plan and whether it ought to be recommended for a rezone. And whatever happens with that road and the future development of that property, how that might work is what consideration to give. Steve, and I ought to throw this to Steve because he just indicated to me that there might be some question about that right of way. And if there is, that really kind of throws into question access to the property altogether. So Steve, do you want to address that?
Yes, thanks. And just to let you know, Will, during the work meeting, I let them know the deference that the general plan usually gets as far as any amendments to it. But during that meeting, and it was apparent from the memo that you put together that the ownership of the proposed right-of-way was not in question. And during the work meeting, Mr. Bailey indicated that indeed it is in question. And so if we have an access issue, it would be my recommendation to the planning commission that the underlying issues not be addressed until indeed we're sure that we do have access to the property.
And I would agree with that. If there is real question about who owns that access and what the ability of the properties that are to behind there, the Anderson property and the applicant's property here, we really need to know what their ability is to access that property. And it sounds like at this point, we don't really know for sure. We probably ought to get that question resolved.
Is it appropriate in this meeting to ask either Ty or Teresa, who kind of did a little more research, to explain what they found at the recorder's office?
Sure.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think everybody's always assumed that was city property at 60 feet. Looks like it was meant to preserve access to those two properties. But because it's not a lot, doesn't have a parcel ID associated with it, we went to find out how we acquired the property. That's one of the questions too. Was it ever purchased or was it just deeded? So we went just to do some homework on it, and there's nothing, we could own it, but there's nothing specifically that says that city property. And so a title search would have to be done to make sure that there's not some sort of deed or access from the surrounding properties. So say everybody gave up some property or whatever in order to leave it more vacant than necessarily city owned. So we couldn't find that we had specific ownership other than if we own it by default, meaning it's in no man's land, for lack of a better term, where all the other properties come up to a certain point and then whatever was left, the city owns. And so I haven't spoken to Jordash at all to find out, do you know if the other properties have access easements already recorded to 700 East through there, or if there's a different one from Anderson versus the Hardy property, or both. So we just don't have a definite answer as far as what we found out in preliminary question at the recorder's office. So,
In my discussion with both Hardy and Anderson, they do have a right of way. I have not figured that out. I haven't gone as far. We haven't done title work yet.
right, so let's assume at this point that there's access easement, but then on 614 and 590, I'm not sure also if they might have some sort of claim to that property. So right now it's just rezone. Rezoning just says this is what we're willing to do, but we're saying that we don't necessarily know that it's actually possible until all that gets figured out, right? So if it's not rezoned, I think it doesn't get researched further necessarily. If it gets rezoned, the developer will probably pursue it and either make it work or not work, but it wouldn't necessarily guarantee that it works just because we've zoned it a certain way, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Ty. Any other comment from any other of the commission members? Mr. Hackett?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page. As I look through this and hear all the discussion in the past two meetings, I feel like there's three separate topics here. Obviously, the density and the zoning, and then the access. And we're not actually being presented with an access topic tonight. So my thoughts are, I haven't heard any reason, and I personally don't feel like the rezoning and the density is an issue of anybody's. And so I'm feeling like the requests are reasonable, and I would be in favor of those type of things. And I think it would allow the developer and the property owners to go discover the further issues that I think are much deeper. And so those are just my comments. I think that's kind of restating what I've heard a few times.
Any others? Okay, now, Mr. Gar's side. Well, I want to share a couple of thoughts first, and I got a question because I know we need to kind of proceed carefully with how this goes, not cause issues down the road. When I first saw this, I don't really know that I loved it, but as I've come to look at this, I actually think this is a good use for the property, to make both pieces of property work, to not landlock someone out with sensitive lands. I think, you know, we may or may not see a full 15 units in there. Slopes, there's a lot to figure in. The density could possibly go down some. What I get a little bit hung up on, especially finding out, I know this isn't the issue of the access tonight, but I think it's something we need to consider. Do we want to do a general plan change and possibly a zone change recommendations when we don't know what that access looks like? And are we going to approve, and as Mr. Garside said, a general plan is not something to take lightly. Are we going to approve something like that, not knowing if there's room or how that access property is, who actually owns it to do it? I do think this is a good use of property, but at this time, I don't know that I would be comfortable with a general plan and change until we know we can get 40 feet or we can get 50 feet and who owns it and how that works out. Now, Steve, as we go forward if there was a motion to a positive recommendation and that failed, is it something that could still be tabled for a month if they wanted to do a title search and look into this and find out who actually owns that property? How does that work?
Yes, that could work because the commission eventually has to get to a majority as far as that goes. So if the first motion is to favorable recommendation, it fails, but then there's a successful motion on tabling it while they do a title search, that is completely appropriate. But you bring up one point that I'd like to underscore a little bit. When a city annexes or rezones a piece of property, they do so with the understanding that they are ready, willing, and able to provide services to that property at that density. And so that's one of the hurdles that we have here is, do we know whether those services can be provided to this property? And that being an unknown, I just want the commission to consider that as they evaluate which way to go.
Thank you. Now, I guess just for the sake of me asking, is it something that if this was tabled this evening, are you guys willing, is that something you're willing to do a title search and do a little more homework into this? I don't know if I can ask that. Is this legal, Steve?
Yeah, you're fine.
This is a discussion we can have. Okay. Don't want to get in trouble. Is that something you guys are willing to entertain rather than receiving a negative recommendation tonight, depending on how the members feel?
Are we okay to proceed with the Hardy property only?
This right of way access would need to be worked out for the Hardy property only as well. As Ty said, there's question now as to whether it's the city's to sell or trade or whatever.
Okay, so if we table this for a month, we go to the research and figure it out. There's no title to it. Does that automatically mean it's Wardell Brothers property at that point?
What did you say today, Ty? There's a potential it's United States property of the United States potentially.
No, so there is a process where you would go through to claim the property, right? Through the recorder's office, but that's a whole other thing. But I think what they're saying is, like, if it doesn't rezone and they pursue option one and they do figure out access, then that's just part of their process to develop that property, right? That would never come back to planning commission. That would just be a building permit type scenario. So they do have that, option to figure it out. It may or may not involve us. It might just be, title search and a proposal. But if nothing else changes as far as, no subdivision or no rezone request, that would be something. Mary, have a comment?
The question before the commission tonight is.
Here comes the mic.
The question for the commission tonight is twofold. You as a commission feel like this piece of property should have a master plan change? That's one question. And you can decide yes or no on that. Second question, based on how you decide, if you decide no, then it's a moot point for zone change. If you decide yes, then the second question is, do you feel that's appropriate to have the zone change? And you decide yes or no on that. And that's the two items before you tonight. The question of access is there. You could make your motions contingent upon the developer determining and addressing who actually owns the access. If you choose to do that, you could do that and make it contingent upon them addressing the access issue. If you're uncomfortable making any of those decisions, yeah, you could table the whole thing. And with the idea that letting the developer know the reason you're tabling it is because either if you flat don't want it, then you need to say that. If you're okay with it and you just want to have the access issues cleared up, you could table it, but give direction to the developer that you have a question on the access issue. Those are some options you have. But you have the option to either approve or disapprove. First off, the master plan change. Second off, approve or disapprove the zone change. You can make both those contingent upon proper identification of the right of way. Or you can make it contingent upon them obtaining ownership of the right of way. That way, if they obtain ownership, then your motion would be valid and good to change the zones. If you should decide not to allow zone change or vote against those, then, then that's where it is. If that made any sense or not, I apologize for butting in. I hope that made some sense.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any other discussion at this time?
Mr. Chair. Sitting listening to this, as this body, I guess we need to ask ourselves, what's the negative and the positive of granting or recommending a rezone on this piece of property? The burden is on the developer. They put in all the work, and if the access is there, then it will work for them. Is it going to change anything for the city to rezone that and change that? I guess is the question. Is it going to be a negative to the city, or is it going to be a positive to the city? And so really, if we vote or we recommend for it to be changed, then it's on them to figure out the accesses and if this project will work for them. And as it stands, it's property that's sitting there. And so I had reading through this at the beginning of the night, I was thinking one thing and sat and listening to everybody. I'm kind of going, I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference to make a change in this property as far as the zone. So I'm kind of stuck here.
So Mayor, if I can just make sure I'm understanding 100%, as part of the motion, you can do a general plan change and a zoning change. Well, two separate motions. We'll do that. You can do this contingent on access. If they can't get the access that's sufficient for it and everyone agrees upon, then this will just go back to how it was.
You can do that if you want. That is one option you have.
Thank you.
The motion could be contingent upon the right of way being determined. And what if you, and again, I'm not trying to propose how you do it. Just giving you options of what could be done.
No,
and that's correct, Lance. If the right of way was not established or not clarified, that would go back to existing current zoning.
No, I appreciate that. I wish we'd had a little more time to talk before we ran out of time in the work session, because I had actually wanted to talk about that, but I appreciate it. Any other discussion at this time? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Remember, this is a recommendation to the city council on the general plan amendment. Mr. Ackett.
I don't know the proper way to word this, but I would like to make a motion that the planning commission recommend pass along a positive recommendation to the city council of the parcel from low density to medium density. I would also like to make the recommendation of a positive recommendation to the city council of a zoning R18 to RM15.
I don't think we can do the zoning yet. That's another public hearing involved, correct? It's two separate motions.
It should be two separate motions, but you could have them in the same public hearing.
Let's go with the first. I'd like to make a recommendation of the general plan amendment from low density to medium density. Contingent on the access and right of way being worked out.
Any discussion on the motion? Oh, can I get a second?
I'll second that.
And we have a second for Mr. Reese. Is there any discussion on the motion?
So, Mr. Chair, I have a question. So with respect to the general plan, could we pull that back up, Teresa? I'd like to see what the general plan is currently versus what is being proposed here. I think you had that in our work session. Thank you. That's it. So just to see if we're all on the same page here, what we've got is the one property, the Anderson property is in blue. Is that correct? The Hardy property is in green. Okay. Do we know or understand why that was put in place years ago from the general plan? I appreciate that we're trying to give deference to that because we're going through that process now, right, with this general plan. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of citizens' comments. So we want to make sure that we're doing it right. So my question is, why is that line right there? Why is that the divider line? And that happens to be right where you're trying to join these two projects.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I can think of the reason being is because 789, I can't see from here. The Anderson property is here and they also have a parcel here. So it could have been just because of ownership, but that's just a guess.
Yeah, I believe the Andersons also own 759 on that.
Thank you. I see Mr. Anderson nodding, I think, or someone. Yeah. Okay. So I guess the follow-up to that is, does it make sense? Does it make sense to make that change? If it's merely just the backyard and they'd like to do that, maybe that's not a significant issue.
Mr. Chair, I got another question or comment. So if we decide to not recommend this and they go ahead with number one and build the one apartment, what is it doing to that parcel of ground, and what in the future are we doing anybody a favor? I guess I'm asking on this by not recommending this to be rezoned. Is there a positive reason that we would say, yeah, I know on this, because in the future it could possibly become this, and we could it would be better for the city, better for the neighbors, better for everybody if we leave it be the way it is and say, and barring that the access is there and everything works, is there a positive reason? And I'm just asking a question to the body. Is there a positive reason to say, no, let's not rezone this, and in a year or 5 or 10, there's going to be a better proposal that will come before us, and we go, oh yeah, this is a lot better idea than what's in front of us tonight, I guess is I'm kind of struggling with. I'm with Lance. I got a lot more questions on that we could talk about on this, but that's what I'm struggling with right now. Is there something that it'd be better than what's proposed and them developing the one piece and the other piece basically sitting there now.
If I can speak to that, I'll share what has partly swayed me a little bit from my original thoughts on this. Right now, by doing option whatever without a rezone, I believe that in the future, we will be seeing this property again, and essentially it's going to be landlocked. And eventually someone will come in, make something work. They're going to purchase a house. They're going to tear a house down to get in there. And then we're going to have two intersections and two roads. That's partly what has swayed me a little on this, to combine it if they can get the access and we can get 50 feet. I am greatly concerned with the home that overlooks this future road and having a drop off 2 feet in front of there, but that's part of the access issue. And I guess that's kind of what swayed me a little as I've thought about this over the last several months since I first saw it as city staff, that eventually someone is going to tear a house down to make it work. And we're just going to end up with two intersections and two accesses into the same thing.
Mr. Chair, I have another thought. I'm just wondering, earlier we talked, I think Teresa, the question was raised, who was notified about this change for the public meeting? I'm just curious, we haven't heard any comment from anyone about the zoning change or potentially having RM15 versus the ones that are in smaller, density right around that. Can you explain how that was done and who was notified, please?
Yes, so what we do with the public hearing is any property owner within 300 feet of the subject property will be notified via mail with a letter indicating what is being proposed, general plan rezone, and from what to what. They also receive the application as well as the map and the site plan. And that was mailed out 2 weeks prior to meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, so it's interesting to me that there was no voice about that issue. I typically see that as as we're looking at this from a general plan perspective, and then the zoning to follow up is another motion potentially. We're talking about higher density going in next to lower density. And not hearing that as a concern, just the roadway. So just some thoughts.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Any other discussion on the motion? Do we remember what the motion is, or should I have Mr. Hackett restate it, or are we good to call for a vote?
I'll have him restate it.
Could you?
Density from low to medium on the proposed parcel.
As well as your
As well as the contingency
Yes.
on access and right of way being resolved.
We've been refamiliarized with the motion at this time. I would like to call for a vote. We already have a motion and a second. I just had him restated so we can remember. So at this time, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor. It appears to be unanimous. Moving on to item number 3, another public hearing, I guess, for a rezone petition from single-family residential R18 to multifamily residential RM15, the same piece of property, 1.5 acres, located at 795 east, approximately 525 north. At this time, I'd like to ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. At this time, we'd like to invite any public comment for this particular item at hand. Seeing none, I don't know if the developer has another interest in speaking to the rezone, or if we've covered it all as part of the general plan change. You're good. Okay. Seeing no public comment, I will call for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Woods, and a second, Mr. Reese, and another vote, please. All in favor? Okay, thank you. It's unanimous. Is there any thing to do with this rezone from planning staff that we should know about, that you could fill us in on this that we haven't already heard? Mr. Garside or Will?
This is Will Summercorn. No, I don't think so. I mean, this is a discretionary action on the part of the council. Ultimately, you're making the recommendation to them. It really comes down to whether you think it's a good idea or not to go ahead and change the zoning on this property. And you may want to take into consideration a lot of the different factors that you've heard about here tonight, about what may happen with the future roadway, if there is indeed the ability to do a roadway there, or how it would develop, what may happen to that property. If the one property develops with 5 apartments and has a private drive, what's the benefit? A lot of different things to consider here, and it's a discretionary decision on your part whether you think it's a good idea or not.
Thank you, Mr. Summercorn. Anything from you, Mr. Garside?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion among the commission members on the rezone? Okay, seeing none, I would like to call for a motion. Mr. Hackett.
I'd like to make a motion that the planning commission make a positive recommendation to the city council of the rezoning petition from single family R182 multifamily residential RM15, contingent on access and right-of-way issues resolved.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Or any, second?
You have a second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reeves. Any discussion on this motion?
Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking out loud here. I'd like to play all the scenarios out in my head. I'm thinking that, so we go ahead and let's say that we approve this, the motion that's on before us. And then the developer decides, you know what? We got that approval, but we like option 1 better. I guess there's not an issue for them. They've got approval either way, right? So they could proceed. Is that a problem then at that point in time?
Well, I believe, assuming right-of-way issues can be worked out, if this didn't pass, they intend to proceed with option number 1 anyways. So if right-of-way didn't work out, they couldn't get enough access for this property, I think they would proceed with option number 1 anyways. And all we've done tonight would be, I guess, null and void, and back on the table for the next person to come along. Am I correct?
Yeah, but our intent would not be to go to option 1. Our intent would be option 3. Definitely.
Thank you. That's helpful to know.
Mr. Chair, I got one last question. Has the city done a study like on impact, what the difference would be? I mean, it's probably asking a lot to rezone this and the difference in the density of the homes. Is it a huge deal to the city? roads, water, all that up there? Have we looked at that? Was it changed at one time for that reason? I just had to sit here and have a thought about changing the zoning. Is there a reason, and how will it impact the city?
Yeah, Ty, if you'd like to speak that, I think I probably could. We'll let you this time.
Yeah, so it hasn't necessarily been studied, but it has been talked about in the development review, and we don't see any limitations or major impact on water, sewer, power. As we've discussed today, it's access and roads are the big question. But as far as water pressure, elevation, capacity, no issues that we foresee.
Okay.
Water mains, it's a high pressure zone available. Definitely plenty of slope for sewer.
Sounds like
Yeah, so, yeah, very minimal impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the issues of the right of way, and there will be some probably stormwater issues that'll need to be dealt with, but that's all stuff that we'll go through staff, and then we'll probably see it as the concept plans and that. So any other discussion on the motion at hand? I guess we all remember what it is this time. We haven't gone quite so long. Are we good to call for a vote? All in favor?
Mr. Chair, real quick question. Was that motion contingent upon the access also with the road? Thank you.
Yes. Okay, seeing no other discussion, all in favor of a positive recommendation to the city council for this rezone, please show. And it appears to be unanimous. There was an item number 4 that has been crossed off our list. Seeing no other items, yes, I can ask for a motion to close the meeting, correct?
I think you're in power. I think you just close
Okay,
it up.
meeting closed. I can't wait to get this done. Thanks, everybody.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.